might get a little, the audio, they should get a little window that pops up that just says I'm okay with this. Okay, I see everybody saying that they're fine, so awesome. Okay, thanks for the reminder, Ken. I would have, gone through the whole thing not recording it. So let's go from here. So let me start with the project team. So my name is Jessica Ray Reed. I am a junior planner out of EcoView Consulting Services in Peterborough. With me tonight, I have Kent Randall, who's available for questions. And on the team as well is Milo Cullen, who is our planning technician at EcoView, as well as Adrian Harrop, who I will touch on a little bit later and her involvement in the project. But just to give you a little bit of an idea on EcoView, we're a private land use planning firm. We work with private and public land use owners in order to facilitate development. We've worked with a variety of rural municipalities across Eastern and Central Ontario, and we've got a variety of municipal experience that has us really excited to be working on this project. Okay, so what is a zoning bylaw? So a zoning bylaw is a land use planning document that implements the policies, goals, and objectives of the official plan in place. By regulating the land use within a community, it provides a legal way to manage land use and for future growth and helps to prevent land use conflicts. Specifically, a zoning bylaw will regulate, amongst a variety of other things, it will regulate how land may be used, where buildings and other structures can be located, the types of buildings that are permitted and how they can be used, as well as lot sizes, dimensions, parking requirements, building heights, setbacks, etc. So why does the Township of Greater Madawaska need a new zoning bylaw? So the update is intended to modernize the policies that are in effect right now. So although, and as stated here, the zoning bylaw was last consolidated in July of 2021, but it hasn't gone through an overhaul update since 2003. And since that time, there have been various provincial and local legislative changes that need to be incorporated into the zoning bylaw to keep the zoning bylaw up to date. The new zoning bylaw will implement the policies of the County of Renfrew official plan, which was also updated in 2020. So it's really just to bring the township into conformity with what the rest of Ontario is kind of using for land use planning. So what are the goals? So the goal is, the main goals are to create a standard and consistent provision and regulations to help to regulate the use of land, building structures across the township. So some things that EcoView has identified as our goals with the zoning bylaw is to create uniform residential zones across the township lands, including zones that speak specifically to population densities. So as of right now, within the settlement area, there's the R1 zone, but we're looking at higher densities and lower densities, just R1 zones that speak to that. So as well as that, we're looking at to produce more seamless map schedules that can be integrated with an online mapping platform that people can use with an online GIS system, as well as create modern lot standards and regulations, more modern setbacks, lot coverage requirements, etc. And we are, of course, going to ensure conformity with the overarching County of Renfrew official plan and review and develop zoning regulations for current topics brought forward through public input. So that's what this is for. We're hoping to create and cause conversation that we can go forward and incorporate those policies that are important to the township into the zoning bylaw. So this is the timeline that we kind of have. So from January and February, we're hoping just to get the conversation going, kind of what are the priorities of the constituents? What are you interested in having done? So that's going to happen from now into February, but I should note the consultation period is going to be ongoing until the point that the final approval of the zoning bylaw happens. People are free to provide comment and speak to the zoning bylaw at any time. The township, as well as EcoView, is happy to receive comments from anybody who's interested. But I will touch on that a little bit later again, but I just wanted to say, it says January to February, but it will go on until the end of the project. The first draft of the zoning bylaw is going to be presented to staff for the review and just the first round of comments in March of 2022. And then we're hoping to have an open house where the public can review the documents that we put together, kind of get the first set of comments on a formal document, and then with the final draft going, being presented in June 2022, and then us getting final approval by July of 2022. And so, so what's next? Where are we going from here? So in tandem with the zoning bylaw update, there are two separate projects that are happening. So there's the development standards update, as well as a growth readiness action plan that are being undertaken right now in tandem with the zoning bylaw update. So the growth readiness study, which if we refer back to my project team slide, that's where Adrienne comes into play. So she's currently undertaking the growth readiness study that is in the draft form now and should be ready in the next few weeks, as well as the development standards, which is also in draft form and should be finalized in the next few weeks. So we're hoping to have both documents available for the public review mid-March. Obviously, we're hoping that's the case right now. So what are the next steps? So public consultation is set to occur from now until mid to late February, but like I said, consultation can happen the entire time. We're hoping to have the public involvement as much as we can. We're trying to start the conversation now so that we open up the floor so that we can kind of stay in constant communication with the public, so you guys know what we're doing, and we can ensure that we're meeting your priorities. And please note that we will have the documents available for review. Back here, the second draft will be available, and the open house will be the opportunity for people to review kind of where we're at and give us additional comments at that point if you don't think that if certain needs are being met in the community. And yeah, it is best that you kind of give us your more detailed comments now. However, it's not necessary. You can give them to us at any point. We're happy to look into them and incorporate them. And yeah, that's all our general, the presentation that we have. We want to open up the floor and give as much time as we have just to hear what the public has to say. But I just wanted to do that. And this is the information that we have. At the bottom here, you can see that there's an opportunity, if you so wish, to have a meeting with EcoView staff to kind of go over more of a site-specific questions that you may have. Please feel free to reach out to Kent or myself, as well as Stefan and Luke at the municipality. So I will stop sharing this now and kind of open it up to everybody else.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, everybody. It's Kent Randall here. I think maybe we should first, we'll go through these questions in the chat. We'll go through a few of those, and then maybe we'll open up the floor to questions or comments. Just going through the chat right now, just quickly, I see from Emily C, she's asking about posting the presentation. So we're happy to post the presentation. And I'm sure, Luke, that's something that you and Stefan can have up on the website.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So I see a question about approach to township, how the township would approach a request for rezoning for development in environmentally sensitive lands. So I'll take a stab at this first, and maybe Luke, if you want to jump in if necessary. So environmentally sensitive lands are typically zoned in an environmental protection zone. And if you wanted to develop within lands that are zoned environmental protection or environmentally sensitive, you would typically have to undertake an environmental impact study to demonstrate that those features that the zone is attempting to encompass. So typically the environmental protection zone coincides with a natural heritage feature like a wetland or a shoreline area and that sort of thing. So if you were to undertake an environmental impact study that demonstrates that feature is not as it's mapped on in accordance with the zoning schedules, then there's a possibility for those lands to be developed. for that zone to be boundary to be altered based on the information provided in the environmental impact study. Luke, is typically as it stands now, if you were to provide that to the township, is that something that would require rezoning, or is it simply just an administrative change to the mapping?
Thanks, Kent. And I'll just back it for those that don't know me. I'm the manager of planning for the township, or the township planner, if you will. Just I'd even maybe take that question at a little bit higher level and just say, in regards to this project, the zoning is the time where we're going to identify lands that are sensitive to development. Like Ken said, with this we have a zoning bylaw that hasn't been updated in almost 20 years. The way the zoning works is we look at the map schedules, and we also, look at, we do site visits, etc., to determine land sensitivity to development. But the zoning bylaw is the starting place where we're going to pick out and identify sensitive features to or development constraints to protect, if you will, and it starts with through this project.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, that the mapping that we attempt to, the schedules are based on the best information that's available to us. So information from MNRF, other agencies that provide the data, GIS data related to features like natural heritage features. They're not always absolutely 100% correct. And that's why there is some latitude or flexibility, provided that the landowner can demonstrate through a study like an environmental impact study or natural heritage evaluation that the feature is not as it's been mapped in accordance with the schedule. So I hope that answers that question. We see there's a couple questions here related to short-term rentals. And this is something that often comes up in places where we work. And Luke, I'm not sure if you've had any discussions at the council level or at the township level about short-term rentals to this point. It is something that we can consider in zoning. It's not necessarily something that it can be controlled exclusively with zoning. It can be controlled with zoning and with municipal licensing. But Luke, I'm not sure if has there been any discussion at the township level related to short-term rentals?
The matter of short-term rentals is very prevalent in the community, and it is the numbers of those units is increasing, as it is in many places. And it is certainly something that the municipality can address, and it's a great forum through the zoning project to identify those thoughts from people in the community related to that use.
Right. So it's certainly something that we'll consider when reviewing the zoning bylaw, and it's it's something that we would need to obviously vet with the public and see where they stand on certain things related to short-term rentals. Okay, so we have a question about, there's a specific question about a cottage property. Maybe we'll just, well, I can read this. I think everybody can see the chat, but I'll just read this just to, well, perhaps we can take this offline. Emily, see if, I think it's probably a question that maybe we can discuss one-on-one. So maybe I'll just move on to the next one.
Ken, sorry, before you do that, can I go back to short-term rentals for a sec?
Mm-hmm.
Just in regards to that, have you guys implemented anything before through your company for short-term rentals?
Yeah, so we have in the township of Romero, we actually undertook a zoning bylaw amendment, so general amendment to their zoning bylaw that identified short-term rental accommodation, short-term rental accommodation as a use in and of itself. The issue that municipalities run into right now is that it's a little bit of a gray area when trying to enforce short-term rentals, because they can be considered under current definitions in most zoning bylaws as just a continuation of a residential use. So what's important with zoning is to identify and sort of isolate it as a separate use into itself. We have done that before, but what becomes an issue is enforcement, of course, and enforcing zoning bylaw provisions, right? And so saying that you're not compliant with the zoning bylaw, there's obviously penalties associated with that, but it's difficult to enforce zoning bylaw compliance on a wide scale. So what has happened in a lot of places where places where we've done work is that we've isolated it as a separate use, but that's been done in tandem with municipal licensing. So licensing under the Municipal Act, where all anyone who's offering short-term accommodation in a private residence has to register with the municipality, has to pay a licensing fee. The fee contributes to a fund that for enforcement and that sort of thing. And the licensing fee can be revoked at any point based on that they're not meeting certain stipulations of how the accommodation needs to be run. So that's typically what we've seen in other places and what we've been a part of.
Okay. And have you noticed any difference with implementing that?
Yes, there has been a difference. I think there's always going to be people violating zoning compliance and even licensing. But what we find is that when there is something out there, that there is a licensing system out there, is that it's more people come forward and they're willing to go through that process to register with the municipality. And then in that case, that particular property is identified in a database at the municipality. So you're accounting for all of those different short places where there are short-term rentals. So yes, there is a positive impact in a lot of cases. We'd have to revisit. A lot of these are fairly recent, so we'd have to revisit in a year or two to see how these programs are running. But we've seen that in our experience, and we've seen that in other places where we've talked to other municipalities where that's occurred, and it seems to have a positive effect.
And you're getting that feedback from the actual owners of the short-term rentals as well, and not just other residents?
Well, I'm not, I'm sure that the owners of the short-term rentals would probably, some of them would rather not have to pay a fee, but I think that there's different approaches in terms of what people want to see. Obviously, people are impacted by those units that are, where there's noise and things like that. They would rather see as much restriction as possible, whereas people who are the unit owners would rather see less restrictions. So, but I think for the most part, the feedback from both sides has been good.
Okay. So I am a short-term rental, like I do have one in the area.
Okay.
So that's why I was kind of touching base on this. I totally understand what you're saying. And I think the feedback to the township as being registered would actually be a really good idea, because there's a lot of income generating, whether it be like tourism, that kind of stuff that a lot of our clients do.
Right.
So I think having a registration is, it's actually a really good idea. It may give other residents a better feeling about it as well, because yes, there are some people that are hiding some of this stuff. And some that are probably not operating it to the best of their ability and are causing some issues, which I manage my own and I manage others. So hopefully that doesn't happen to a lot of places around here. But yeah, I think
right.
I think we've been involved. My husband and I have also been involved with the club and the township as well. And I know that they recognize. Sorry, I know they recognize a lot of tourism potential with that stuff too, and they take recognition in that. So I mean, if this is also something that maybe helps them be able to see some of that stuff too, then that's good.
Okay. Well, thank you for the comments, Jenny. We appreciate it. That's a good perspective to have. Okay, so we have another question. I guess it's from Jenny about the things that we're looking to change. That what is out of date. So typically, what we find with older zoning bylaws is that things like, particularly in residential zones. So each zone, for those who don't know, the municipality is divided into a number of different zones in different categories: residential, industrial, commercial, and you have your environmental protection and hazard zones as well. But what we find with a lot of older zoning bylaws is that the residential zone categories aren't necessarily sensitive to higher densities and higher density development that is now what the province and the overarching policies in the County of Brantford official plan, what is required of of development, of new development now within the municipality. So we need to ensure that we are creating provisions in the zoning bylaw that provide enough flexibility for higher densities in places where it's appropriate, of course. But it's a matter of going through those setbacks and things like setbacks, lot coverage, and that sort of thing, just to ensure that modern standards for development are reflected in the zoning bylaw. So that's one of the when we say out of date, that's one of the things. The other thing is just ensuring that a big thing is mapping, and Luca touched upon this, that it's good to update the mapping based on all the information that we've had in the last 20 years that has come up, particularly as it pertains to things like natural heritage or aggregate resources or whatever else, in just ensuring that the mapping is accurate, because there's a lot of there are a lot of parts to the mapping that may not reflect what's on the ground now. So that's another aspect of updating in accordance with modern what's happening now, what's current. Okay, so then we have a question: going forward, would these potential changes have an effect on legal non-conforming buildings and their setbacks and expansion as referred to in 37/2009? So so legal non-conformance, for those who don't know, a legal non-conforming use is a use that is in existence as of the date of the passing of a zoning bylaw in which does not conform to that zoning bylaw. So in other words, it's not permitted. So the new zoning bylaw will not impact that as long as it's established that it is legal non-conforming now. If it's a use that's no longer conforming after the approval of the new zoning bylaw, then it would also enjoy legal non-conforming status from here on out. But I don't anticipate that there would be many uses that would be captured like that with the new one. You'd see legal non-conforming uses from 40, 50 years ago. Now, when you mention setbacks, that's related to compliance, so non-compliance, and so those are two different things. Non-compliance might come up a little bit more with the new zoning bylaw if there are, again, modern setbacks that aren't that might create compliance issues. So compliance is related to things like setbacks or lot coverage or other sort of what we call performance standards associated with a lot. And so like a building that complies with the zoning bylaw now, but doesn't comply with the new zoning bylaw because we have new setbacks in place that it won't meet, for instance, that would be considered legal non-complying. It would enjoy that status. It wouldn't have to comply with the new provisions. However, if you were to do any modifications to that building, you'd be subject to the provisions related to non-complying buildings and structures. So there is an allowance in there for people to rebuild those structures if they need to, expand them if they need to, but there are restrictions on how they can expand or reconstruct. So I hope that answers that question.
I just add, I see that we're almost at the end of the questions. If other people who haven't typed want to voice their comments, you can, there's a little notification you can add just to raise your hand, and then we can just kind of go in chronological order of people who want to speak as opposed to type, just to let everybody know. So sorry, Kent, you.
So yeah, and you can also raise your hand too, and there's down at the bottom, you'll see the reactions button there, and you'll see a raise hand button. Just hit that if you'd like to speak. I'll just try to get through these questions, and if somebody raises their hand, we can always go off to them as well. Okay, so yeah, Emily C, I think you're asking, but I think that's pretty specific. I'd like to, Emily C, if you do, I'm happy to chat about your specific comment after, because I think it's a little specific probably for this discussion, but we can have a chat about it after. So please, please feel free to email me, and we can set up a call. So then we have a question, how will trailer parks, tours and commercial, and those that are not on septic be dealt with going forward, especially when it comes to dumping of gray and black water directly into the ground? Will they continue to be grandfathered and therefore be able to have status quo on their business practices? When it comes to servicing a site, an existing site, the activities associated with, or the servicing associated with the use is not necessarily governed by what we're doing here. If it's an existing system like a holding tank of some sort, I think that it looks like that's what you're talking about here. If somebody's doing something like dumping gray water or black water into the ground, that's something that we're not necessarily, the zoning can't really deal with. That's, if somebody is doing something like that, where they're not allowed to, if they're dumping something like that, I would say that that's probably an MECP, Ministry of Environment issue. It's not necessarily something that we can deal with through zoning. What zoning does is it does have standards for new development or redevelopment. So should a trailer park require any modifications that change aspects of the existing development, like changing buildings, expanding buildings, and that sort of thing, they would be subject to current zoning provisions or provisions related to non-compliance if they are non-compliant. But regardless, they'd be subject to the zoning provisions. You mentioned grandfathering. That goes back to legal non-conformance. That's another term you could use for that, grandfathering. So there are a number of non-conforming sites in the township, and they will continue to enjoy legal non-conformance. But they can continue the legal non-conforming use, but they can't expand without permission under the Planning Act or an amendment to the zoning bylaw. So I hope that answers your question, but generally it's not something that would be governed by the zoning bylaws if somebody's dumping something. Luke, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it's, again, back to this forum, it's great to get their thoughts out. We do have, we are a community, what we are so fortunate to have our lakes and rivers and the associated uses that come along with those. The trailer parks are typically in a tourism commercial zone. But as Kent mentioned, if there's a pollution issue, that can be dealt with either through township staff or other means. We those some of them are businesses that are recognized in the zoning bylaw, and we'll see what happens with the mapping updates and how the new provisions that are drawn up will apply to these uses and sites and properties.
Okay, thanks, Luke. So moving on to the next question, you mentioned identification of areas where residential density will be increased. How does this tie in with dealing with the problems of traffic on Calabogie Road and other trunk roads? So Jess had mentioned in her presentation that the zoning bylaw is intended to implement the official plan. So the Township of Greater Madawaska is the County of Renfrew official plan acts as a local official plan for the township, and the county OP has various designations that apply to across the township. And they're kind of like zones. You can think of them in a way as zones. There are areas that are identified for certain types of development, so residential development, commercial development, and things of that nature. So what we're trying to do is the zones that will be applied, or that will be applying or changing on the map, are intended to reflect what those designations are. I don't anticipate that there's going to be a lot of major changes in terms of density, increasing density, tenfold or something like that. What we mean by that is that in terms of reflecting densities is that we want those zones to be able to allow what is proposed or what is planned in the county OP. So in the associated designation above in the county OP, for instance, if the residential designation allows for a certain density, we want to make sure that the underlying zone reflects that. What does this mean for your existing infrastructure and things like that? Well, as long as the county OP reflects how to deal with existing infrastructure, which it does, then those zones shouldn't impact that too much. Now, if somebody is going to propose something where they're introducing new zones or introducing new development, depending on how big of a development that may be, they would be required to do some sort of traffic study to demonstrate that the road network can accommodate that proposal. Otherwise, we're going to follow the designations as they've been approved under the county OP. So we're trying to reflect whatever is identified or designated for development in that document. So I hope that answers that question. In terms of dealing with existing traffic problems, that probably something that needs to be dealt with long-term if there are any issues that the township would have to deal with long-term through, transportation plans and things like that. Okay, so then there's another question mentioned basing some bylaws off density. Will Calabogie be evaluated differently than, say, Griffith area that's more rural? Yes, the answer is yes. And again, those densities are reflective of what the OP says. So the OP, will identify areas for, more concentrated development, Calabogie being sort of the primary settlement area, whereas a place like Griffith is Hamlet, settlement area, it's not expected to accommodate high densities because of the size and the size of the existing hamlet settlement area, and the fact that it's on private servicing. So yes, the rural areas and even the settlement areas are treated differently in some cases. So and again, our guiding document is your approved county OP. We're not trying to stray from what the official plan, which has a 20-year outlook of growth in the township. We're not straying from that. We can't. We need to conform to what that OP says. So then we have a question. So perhaps this question should have been addressed to Luke as well. We all know there are over 300 additional housing units around the peaks. So that was the question related to the traffic. So Luke, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about what I was saying about traffic.
No, I guess I'll just only add that, Calabogies, what's happening now is it seems to be we're a growing community, and we're fortunate for that. And as development is planned for, we will take the appropriate review and steps needed to ensure it happens properly and it works for our community.
So that I think we've gone through the chat questions. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask directly? Just looking through here, I see a hand up. I'm sure that the gentleman's name is not Alana, but I see Jess. You see Alana LaPlante, gentleman with the glasses.
I do. Yeah. Let me just ask.
Can you unmute?
We'll see. I can't unmute him. I have to ask.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to ask the question.
Yes, go right ahead.
My name is Sam Baird, by the way. I'm using Alana's iPad.
Right. I figured.
The item I'd like to raise is this whole item of rezoning. Would it be an appropriate time with this bylaw zoning update to create a shoreline zone area in Calabogie? Certainly many other townships have the same size of lake that we have and the same number of homes. Have other municipalities taken it upon themselves to create a shoreline zone where the actual setbacks and other building parameters are different from what they are in the regular rural zoning, etc.? I throw that out to you.
Right. Well, that's a good question. Yeah, and maybe Luke can kind of help me out with this if it's something that has been considered. It now would be the time to do that. It certainly could be the time to introduce it. I know that the township has a limited service residential zone, but that's, that can be a different category altogether from a shoreline or waterfront zone or waterfront residential. Yeah, it is within the realm of possibility to add something like that. Certainly what we look at, what we're looking at are setbacks from water features, bodies of water, setbacks from rivers, lakes, and that sort of thing, ensuring that we have setbacks that are modern and that reflect how development should occur adjacent to those features. So whether or not there's a separate category, there's certainly going to be something in there related to sort of a general setback that would be applied to a lake or a body of water. That's at least the direction that we're likely to go. But it's within the realm of possibility to introduce a zone like that. Luke, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think it's an excellent comment. It's something that is dealt with very regularly in Greater Madawaska Township, again, with the waterfront development. So we have some zone provisions related to water setback presently, but I think as Kent mentioned, it's something that that will likely be discussed, and appreciate the comment.
Yeah, so that's a good comment.
Could I just build on that for one moment?
Yeah.
The one item on the shoreline that does cause some irritation and causes a lot of discussion with shoreline owners, and that's this concept of established line. It seems to me that the concept of established line is very archaic, intended or put in place decades ago, and it may be the appropriate time if you're looking at the shoreline zone, that this whole concept be removed, because it really does away with the shoreline setback. What your zoning is trying to do is to keep property away from the shoreline, and there's been changes over the years that have moved this from 50 feet to 75 feet to 100 feet to 100 in certain places. And the concept of an established line, as I said, I think it's quite troublesome. It's irritating to many folks. And I throw that out as something that you may want to put a note down to look at as you move forward.
Okay, yeah, that's noted. I know that some places use it and some places don't, an established building line, and we want to be able to be flexible where it's necessary, but we also want to be able to protect the features, of course, right? And so there's a balance there, and we'll certainly consider how that's implemented with the new zoning bylaw. And perhaps it's a matter of changing things or amending things or taking a different approach. So that's something to consider for sure. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the chat for a second here. Maybe we are already able to do this across township, and I'm not aware. If so, apologies. Will property owners be able to buy the 66-foot shoreline, recognizing that the setback requirements don't change, but it would increase our property size while not changing what we are allowed to do with it? Luke, does the township have a policy related to purchasing shore road allowances?
Not explicitly. Interestingly enough, there's not, because a lot of our main waterway along the Madawaska is a flooded waterway. So right. Those historic shoreline road allowances for in many cases are underwater. And so since I've been at the township, we have not been in a situation of selling a shoreline road allowance. Okay,
so that's kind of not, it's not necessarily related to zoning. I think what we would ensure that I think you make a good point in terms of that it doesn't change the setback requirements, which is absolutely right, but would increase the property. And it's good to, that, you know, a lot of people, it's advantageous, of course, for a landowner to have direct access without having to cross that public property. So, but it's not necessarily something that we would deal with this update. Okay, how detailed will the new mapping be? We own property within the village of Madawaska, and although our traveled road access is on our survey and on our neighbor's survey, and it was shown as a road in the early Renfrew County maps, only part of it shows up on the Renfrew official plan, and neither them or the township were able to tell me if it's a municipal road. Without proper mapping, how can density within Madawaska go up? So the mapping will be fairly detailed. It obviously can't, just given the scale and the size of the township geographically, it's difficult to get right down to a specific level. But the data that we have is pretty good. It's fairly accurate. It's not 100% accurate. It never will be, but it's pretty accurate. So it will be fairly detailed. It will certainly, what we check, you know, with any new mapping exercises, we're always checking where municipal roads end and begin, especially in areas where there's a lot of private roads, like a, you know, place like Greater Madawaska, where there'd be private roads on lakes or wherever. So we are cognizant of that, and we want to make sure that those roads are accurately depicted. So it is something that we would show on the map where the municipal roads end and where the private roads begin.
And if I could just add, Kent, through this project as well, once we have some draft mapping available for everybody in the community, please check the mapping, check how it affects your property, look what's there, see if something's missing, see if you know, something should be added, and provide comments, please, because that is part of this project.
Right. Yeah. And then okay, so then question about where properties front on OPG, shoreline, and licensing agreements are in existence. Will that be taken into consideration in the new property designations, as we do not own the shore but are taxed as if we are? Luke, do you have any insight into that? I don't think that it changes anything, certainly from a tax standpoint, but
no, I think we have some you know, we have a situation of land ownership with OPG licensing, and then some tax matters, which you know, is not to be confused with the zoning of a property. Yeah. So
yeah, it's a different thing, and you know, if you did have if for some reason the zone has changed on your property, again, we're not necessarily expecting a lot of wide scale changes, but it doesn't necessarily have any implication on that licensing or the tax. Is it the GIS mapping that is being updated, or is it that Renfrew County that has to make the changes? So the way that we understand it is that we update the mapping, we're updating it in a GIS format, and that information is provided to the county. The county will upload it to their interactive map. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Again, if I don't catch, I'm sorry if we don't catch you raising your hand. Like, there's a raise hand button if you can find it down there if you do want to add something or say something. I'm just scanning through here. Jess, do you see anybody on there putting their hand up?
I don't think so.
I don't see anybody on there.
But obviously there's an opportunity to email and let us know. And then
yeah, and Jess, do you want to put up that last slide again too, the information slide?
Yep.
So Stefan, who's on the Zoom call as well from the township, can be sorry, where was that? Yeah,
there we go.
His contact information is there, and then my contact information is up there. As Jess said, if you want to have a one-on-one discussion, we're happy to do that as well. We can set that up. I know that it's not always the best format, especially in a virtual setting like this. Like, our preference is always to have an in-person open house. That way we do, you know, some of these questions that I was seeing on the side where I'm saying, you know, I'd rather do it one-on-one. You know, that works obviously much better in a in-person setting, but we're dealing with what we need to deal with now. And this is how things are. So the virtual setting is not always the most comfortable for everyone. So, you know, if you do have any questions, or if you want to talk about issues that you've run into, here's the contact information. We're happy to discuss at any time. We can set up a time. Well, obviously schedule time to talk, and happy to have a chat. So since it's just about 5:30, if there are no other questions, we'll just wrap this up. So thank you everyone for attending. It was well attended. We're happy to see so many people interested in this project. And as Jess said, this is an introductory meeting. There's more to come. There's more outreach to come. We haven't drafted anything yet. So this is we're in a fact-finding section. We're in the fact-finding section of the project. And so if you do have any other follow-up questions or anything else, feel free to contact us. And we're happy to chat. We're happy to respond.
Great.
So thank you, everybody.
Yeah. And I like how fast Jessica talks.
Glad you could keep up with it the entire time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We wanted time for you to talk. We want time for everyone to talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Okay, so just wait. I'll just
I'm just gonna end it.
yeah, you can end it now.
Okay, sweet. Okay,
right.
bye. Have a good night.
You. Bye.